How's it going, and welcome to No Fun Allowed's guide series on Candlekeep Mysteries, a 5th edition module. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the Book of Cylinders, and all the mystery that pertains. Of course, there's going to be a ton of spoilers, so players don't watch this, but DMs that want that added insight, go ahead and stick around because we've got a lot to cover. So the real mystery to this whole book is, where is the mystery? Turns out there is none. This is more of just a typical D&D adventure where you're given some info, you go to a place, and you do a thing, you fight some bad guys along the way. The only real twist here is that there is some good Yuan-Ti to be found here, but this information is given so early on, it's not that much of a mystery. Really, the only mystery is why are the Yuan-Ti there in the first place, and that is something that you do uncover later on. This adventure begins with an Avowed showing up to your players' footsteps and going ahead and giving them this book, and also saying, yeah, Candlekeep regularly gets a whole bunch of food from these Gripply folk all the way over there, but we haven't received any shipments for a few weeks now, so what's going on with that? So here, take this book, and also you're going to get a reward if you go and do the adventure. The cool thing about this book is that your players open it up, and it turns out it's just a container for a whole bunch of cylinders. And how these cylinders work is, you get them, you roll them over some clay, and they go ahead and tell a story. You know, that's actually really cool. That is definitely historic. That's pretty awesome. And it's just a great way to have some cool foreshadowing. Unfortunately, there isn't that much foreshadowing to be had in this adventure, really, because the first cylinder really just shows off the Gripply living, and then the second cylinder shows off some serpent people outside of the village, and the third cylinder shows off what happens after the snake people get done attacking it. The place is pretty much laid bare. So your players may have a few ideas about what's going on here in regards of, did this happen long ago? Is it happening right now? Are we going back in the past? What's going on here? My interpretation of this is, this happened long ago, and it's currently happening again. This is history repeating itself, but your players can go ahead and change it up this time. Your players may be curious about these Gripply people and go ahead and ask, and they will be rewarded with a bunch of information from the Avowed here. They will get a ton of information here, most notably the fact that, oh yeah, the Gripply, they had some Yuan-Ti show up recently, and the Yuan-Ti were good, and they were excavating somewhere nearby. Oh yeah, and by the way, a second group of Yuan-Ti came, and these monsters are vicious and cruel, and were the opposite of the good Yuan-Ti. So that's already right there giving away the adventure. I personally would not give away this information because this is just taking away any remote information about the mystery that's going on here. Maybe you can play up for a little bit longer that they don't know that there's going to be Yuan-Ti here. But if you have any D&D veterans and you say there's going to be snake people or serpent people, they're probably going to think it's Yuan-Ti. Before we get any further with the video though, I just want to give a huge shout out to all my amazing patrons up here. You guys are helping me out so very much. Thank you. Absolutely incredible. Thank you for all the amazing stuff that you're doing. I am putting out some content as well, and stay tuned on Patreon because I am going to be announcing some fun Candlekeep stuff going on over there. Secondly, I also want to shout out Foxglove Armor and the amazing maps that are coming out from her. She is putting out these amazing maps, so go ahead and check her out as well. Links down below. Incredible stuff. These are the kind of maps that I love to see when I'm running virtual tabletops because the art just pops, the colors are fantastic, and I certainly can't wait to see what more maps come out. Once your party decides to set out for the location, they have two options, either take a boat or walk. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, you should probably just not allow your players to walk because, one, that just takes too long, there's really no point, you don't get to meet this character, it sort of just is a waste of time really, and even later on here it shows off the overland voyage of, yeah, you should punish your players for doing the dumb thing here. I'm not in the camp of trying to punish my players, you know, especially for a one-shot. I just want to go ahead and have some fun. So maybe just go ahead and chalk it up to the sea voyage, where they get to meet up with a one Meteor Jans, who can actually help them communicate with the Gripply once they arrive at the outpost. Once your players arrive to the trading post, there it is where they're going to meet the Gripply that have escaped the village from the evil Yuan-Ti, and there they'll be able to speak with Pond Mother. So it states that the Gripply can only speak in Primordial. Pond Mother herself can in fact speak Common, though she doesn't like to. So you can either have her speak Common, or you can just have Meteor Jans go ahead and do the translating here. She will go ahead and say, yes, some good Yuan-Ti showed up, and then some bad Yuan-Ti showed up, and unfortunately there's a whole bunch of captives still in the village. We have both Gripply and the good Yuan-Ti trapped in there, so any assistance you provide would be of great help. The Gripply don't have too much to offer in regards of gold, but you can go ahead and tease that they can provide a very excellent service, which is detailed later on in the adventure. which is the ability to speak Gripply. We'll be getting to that at the end. If you really want to drive up how evil the bad Yuan-Ti are, you can go ahead and say, oh yes, we've observed that these evil Yuan-Ti are eating our eggs, and they're eating the eggs directly in front of other Gripply. You know, that's pretty evil, honestly. That's just pure evil right there. With this, hopefully your players feel the urge to go ahead and do good deeds and justice and make their way to the village, which they can only get to by going over a boat and being dropped off on the crab maze. So here is the crab maze. So something very important to note here is this art is incredibly great, by the way, fan-freaking-tastic. But the thing is, it's not directly to scale, or perhaps it's a little bit different than what we're given. As we can see here, once you players start walking through the crab maze, they will in fact have to make stealth checks, and this is a group stealth check in order to make their way through a DC 20. And if they fail, then they are attacked by 1d4 plus 2 giant crabs. But the thing is, giant crabs aren't monstrous, not like the picture presents. Giant crabs are just medium-sized, which still, you know, that's honestly pretty freaky if there's a 5-foot crab coming after you. But still, it's not as monstrous as that picture appears. So for the information on the crab maze here, we get told that you should drop your players off at any end that you desire. And with that, your players can go ahead and just start walking. As your players make their way through the crab maze, they're going to have to make a DC 20 group stealth check in order to make their way through here every 100 feet. If your players fail, then they are attacked by 1d4 plus 2 giant crabs that climb their way out and attack the party. Here's the thing, this is a higher level adventure, so those giant crabs are practically going to do nothing. In all honesty, they're probably not even going to hit the AC junkies, and your players can go ahead and blow these crabs out of the water. Hey-yo! Also something important to note here is your players could be shown this art, and they can go ahead and look at what's going on here, and your players may think to themselves, hey, isn't there just another way we could approach this village? Couldn't we just get dropped off somewhere else and make our way from the land and, you know, maybe climb up these walls or go through the forest or whatever? In which case, I would go ahead and reward that creativity. Maybe the captain of the ship says, hey, I'm not going to get too close to there, but if you have any sort of magics or you're willing to go ahead and climb the walls, sheer cliff or whatever, you can go ahead and do that, but I'm not going to get the ship too close. Go ahead and reward that creativity. Maybe your players see that there's this giant crab maze and think to themselves, yeah, we don't feel like getting got right now. But if you're going by the maze, then your players can go ahead and eventually make their way over to the breakwater, which they can easily circumnavigate. So if your players were loud, they're casting a whole bunch of loud spells, they're yelling and screaming and shouting as they're destroying the crabs, then of course the Yuan-Ti are going to know that they are there. But if they were relatively stealthy, or they just, whenever they got into combat, they weren't shouting and screaming or whatever, then the Yuan-Ti aren't going to lay an ambush. So the important thing to note here is that the only information that we're given on either role-playing these Yuan-Ti or just, you know, using them is that these creatures fight to the death and they're totally arrogant, and that's it. That's relatively boring in my opinion. The Yuan-Ti are smart. In fact, they probably are smarter than some of your PCs. So them fighting to the death doesn't really sit well with me. But hey, you could go ahead and say that they're overzealous, maybe they're confident because they're gorged on all these Gripply eggs, or maybe they think that the party is just a bunch of weaklings, or, you know, whatever the case may be. Maybe they're seeing visions from their deity and they refuse to back down. You can go ahead and justify it that way. Once your players get through the breakwater, they can make their way to the village itself, and there they'll be able to see that there's a whole bunch of awesome little huts everywhere, and your players can start making their way around. The religious center of the village, Pond Mother's home, your players can make their way here, and you can totally tell them, hey, you know, out of all these buildings, only one of them stands out, you know, as being big and different. Your players may think to themselves, okay, maybe there's something going on here. They show up and they will discover the good Yuan-Ti being held captive by the bad Yuan-Ti. Once your players smite the evil Yuan-Ti, then the good Yuan-Ti can go ahead and tell them a whole bunch of information. The good Yuan-Ti can say, oh yes, the evil Yuan-Ti showed up, and by the way, there's a whole bunch of them at the temple all the way up there to the north. You should go ahead and help out there. So your players may try and press gang these individuals into going ahead and helping out. To mitigate that, I would just strongly recommend saying that all these Yuan-Ti look incredibly beat up and have no will to fight at all because they're too broken. Over at the Brood Pools, your players can get into a combat encounter with 4 Yuan-Ti Purebloods and 2 Yuan-Ti Malisons of any type of your desire. I always like changing things up with the Yuan-Ti Malisons because, hey, there's 5 different types, might as well use them, right? The interesting thing about this combat encounter is your players show up and they can find these Yuan-Ti just lounging around, and if a combat ensues, then it'll just be combat as normal until round 3. Once round 3 occurs, then one of those Malisans is going to go ahead and dastardly take some poison and pour it into one of the pools. And mind you, there's 5 pools in total. So I would go ahead and strongly showcase that off if combat is still going on. That one of these evil Yuan-Ti says, "Nyahaha," and just drops a whole bunch of poison in, killing a whole bunch of eggs. And that's going to tell your players, okay, we're going to have to kill this thing before it does more harm. And that is a fun little dynamic to the combat encounter here, that the Malisans can just be vindictive and kill all these Gripply. And you know, it's going to be a great way to go ahead and have some people split up on this combat encounter. Mind you, we're not given any maps at all for an actual combat encounter here, but I promise you, go over to the Discord and to the Reddit. People are already hard at work making some awesome maps for this, and I actually already have seen some maps for this, so go ahead and check them out. And lastly, for the homes and storage here, we get some information about what their houses look like. Pretty cool, honestly. They don't sleep in water, but they have hammocks over the water, and this is just an awesome way to give them a sense and feel of their own style. Once your players know where to go because they've either been told by Pond Mother that, oh, hey, you know, there's something going on at the temple, or they've just gone ahead and cleared out all the Yuan-Ti in the village, they can finally make their way up there to the top right to get to the old village, and specifically the temple. For the old village and temple, we get some information here about how the Gripply moved away from this location a long time ago, and the good Yuan-Ti, the followers of the Scaled Mother, arrived here trying to just excavate the place, but then the evil Yuan-Ti showed up, captured some of them, and are actually now right in the middle of the process of doing a ritual sacrifice. So we're not giving it on this map of Roll20, but something to note is when your players arrive to the temple, there should be a whole bunch of Gripply prisoners here, and the Gripply are going to be smart enough not to call out and shout out or whatever, but the Gripply prisoners that are located all around here are going to go ahead and use hand gestures and go ahead and point to the inner temple and go ahead and try to get the party to go ahead and stop them. In Area 1, we get some great stuff here in regards of what the temple looks like, and we also get some information here about how the Gripply prisoners that are here are going to go ahead and slip away as the players make their way past. So as we can see here on the map, there is 2 staircases that lead down. A ramp down ends at a wall of rubble after 15 feet. This is what the Yuan-Ti were excavating, and supposedly what the Gripply prisoners are excavating as well. So there's no pertinence to this in this adventure, but there is a little snippet at the end there that says that the Yuan-Ti could continue excavating this place afterward. In Area 2, we have the upper court, and this is where the big showdown is going to occur. When your players make their way through in here, they'll see 2 Yuan-Ti that are bound on an altar, and more importantly, they're going to see 2 Yuan-Ti Malisans, but most important of all, a Yuan-Ti abomination. Abominations are pretty scary. This is not exactly the highest level adventure, so that Yuan-Ti abomination could theoretically lay the smackdown on a group that's not prepared, or if they've already blown through a decent amount of their resources. So when your players arrive here, they'll arrive just at the perfect moment as this Yuan-Ti sacrifice is about to go down, as currently one of the Yuan-Ti is using the chime of opening to try and open up the sarcophagus, inside of which is some pretty cool looking items. However, it's going to take multiple turns to open this thing up, so the Yuan-Ti are going to go ahead and fight to protect the abomination during this whole event. So it states here for the ritual that the Yuan-Ti abomination is going to go ahead and chime that sarcophagi open, and if it is allowed to do this for 2 whole turns, then the Yuan-Ti that are here that are good are going to be sacrificed, and it's going to be terrible and tragic. But if the Yuan-Ti takes even a single point of damage, the Yuan-Ti is just going to go ahead and turn around and attack. So hopefully when you go ahead and tell your players as they look inside that there is a ritual going on, and if they do not act now, then the good Yuan-Ti are going to die, hopefully you have proactive players that are going to go ahead and step on in. Theoretically, it is possible that your players go ahead and say, yeah, let's go ahead and see what's going to go happen here. In which case, go ahead and play that out. If your players do not stop this in time, whether it's because they just straight up don't damage the Yuan-Ti, or they go ahead and just watch what happens, then the 2 prisoners are going to die, the sarcophagus is going to open, and there inside, your players are going to be able to see 2 incredibly awesome items. However, hopefully you have some people that are proactive and want to, save people. So your players are probably going to jump right on in. But because this is a 6th level adventure, some of the spellcasters are going to have some AoEs, classic fireballs and stuff. So it's more likely that the abomination is going to get hit, in which case the ritual is going to stop, and then a combat's going to occur. your players were probably going to be smart enough to go ahead and use the terrain to their advantage here. Maybe they go ahead and rush in, and that's fine, but they're going up against two Yuan-Ti Malisans, a Type 1 and a Type 3, and also going up against the Abomination. So this is actually a relatively tough fight. If your party is low on resources because they've been fighting all the Yuan-Ti in the village, this fight could prove extremely deadly. But hopefully they have what it takes to defeat this evil Abomination and the evil Yuan-Ti, and they can go ahead and save the day. Should your players be successful in killing the evil Yuan-Ti, then they will be rewarded with a Chime of Opening and a Lantern of Revealing. Really awesome stuff. And also the fact that your players will be able to see the sarcophagus is halfway open, and now that they don't have to do this evil ritual anymore, they can go ahead and free the good Yuan-Ti, get them out of there, and they can just easily go ahead and open up the sarcophagi with another use of the Chime of Opening, and then they will be rewarded with the Serpent Scale Armor and the Serpent's Fang, two incredibly awesome magical items. In the aftermath of saving the day, the good Yuan-Ti are going to go ahead and praise the party and say, oh yeah, we came here from Chult, and we've been on this excavation, and those evil Yuan-Ti showed up, so it's totally awesome that you arrived. The benevolent Yuan-Ti could decide to go ahead and keep on excavating this place, in which case, hey, there could be some font of awesome adventure later on. Maybe there's something hidden underneath this temple. Or the Yuan-Ti maybe just go ahead and say, yeah, let's go ahead and make our way back to Chult so we don't get innocent people involved anymore. So something to note here is your players could theoretically bypass the village and make their way directly to the temple here, kill the Yuan-Ti Abomination and these two Malisans, in which case there's still a bunch of Yuan-Ti back in the village. You know, depending on how things go, depending on the time that you have, if this is running a one-shot or this is part of a big-blown campaign, then maybe it makes sense that if the Yuan-Ti Abomination is killed, then none of the other Yuan-Ti are going to want to stick around. Because if the boss gets killed and, you know, these party members are still looking fine, then maybe they're just too strong and they just go ahead and just start running away. But of course, if you did go down the route of the players making their way past the village into the temple here, then you can have those fun interactions where maybe the Yuan-Ti are holding up everyone as hostages and it gets into this long drawn out engagement. You know, there's a lot of fun things you can do with that for sure. Once the Yuan-Ti have been driven out, the Grippli are going to return home and repair everything and of course mourn all of the losses and get ready to go ahead and start life anew. Because of their great efforts in saving the day, Pawn Mother is going to go ahead and say, hey, I can perform an awesome ritual for you all. Why don't you go ahead and accept? And if your players do accept, then they get a pretty awesome reward here. They can go ahead and be bestowed upon them the ability to both speak and understand Grippli. So, of course, you know, more often than not, most campaigns don't have Grippli in them or whatever. But the real aspect here isn't the fact that they can just speak freely with any Grippli that they interact with. The great benefit I see here is that the party members are going to have a language that they can speak to each other, but no one else would really understand. Because who else besides Grippli would understand Grippli? So I think that's a really cool thing to have. You know, your players have a language that very few people would actually know. Your players can get showered in all the rewards that were promised to them, either by Pawn Mother and or the Candlekeep Avowed, and then the adventure ends. For the last little bit of the book, we get this information on the Grippli, and we also get this great art. You know, the Grippli are pretty cool looking, and we get this great info about how Grippli act as a community and how they interact with life. So, unfortunately for me, I'm gonna have to say that this is one of the weaker adventures in the whole lineup. One, because there is no mystery here. I read the thing, you know, word for word. I don't see an actual mystery here, not from the player's perspective, not from my perspective. There really isn't that much of a mystery here. This seems more just like a traditional one-shot adventure where your players go up against some Yuan-Ti, and then they go up against some more Yuan-Ti, and then they go up against some more Yuan-Ti and save the day. It's really not that captivating for me. There is certainly a lot of ways to go ahead and flare this up, though. I certainly think that there is a lot of fun to be had with the timed encounters to be had here, specifically at the brood pools. I think a dynamic encounter there is pretty awesome. And then also at the temple, I think there's a way you can go ahead and make that a lot more of an engaging experience. Well, something I did to discourage AoE effects in the temple there to go ahead and just wipe out everybody. I had a whole bunch of Grippli lined up against the walls to make sure that the party wasn't just blasting fireballs or whatever else inside of there. I thought that was just a way to make sure that it wasn't just a traditional combat. One of the highlights for me about this was the crab maze. I think there's a lot of fun you can have with that as well. You don't have to have them going up against just puny little pathetic little crabs. I would go ahead and say that they're totally awesome monstrous crabs. I think that could be way more fun as well. Maybe go ahead and bump up the stats a little bit. Maybe go ahead and change up how many show up there. but I think a fun little combat on the crab walk before you get into Yuan-Ti after Yuan-Ti after Yuan-Ti fight is a way to go ahead and break up the monotony here. So besides the lack of mystery here, I think the real issue is the lack of variety here, because your players just go up against Yuan-Ti Purebloods, they go up against Malisons, and then they go up against one Abomination. I think having some sort of other combat encounter occur here could have been fun. Maybe there could have been a combat where there's some Gripply that are being told that they have to fight the party, and there's some evil Yuan-Ti holding some eggs in the back, and then your players have to struggle with the idea of, oh, we have to fight these evil Yuan-Ti, but these Gripply are attacking us. How do we stop them from doing that? Do we knock out these Gripply? Do we put them to sleep? Do we have to kill them? You know, I think that could have been a fun dynamic encounter. You know, maybe just having a different sort of minion type or something for these Yuan-Ti. There is definitely a fun adventure to be had here, and I certainly think that between the community that you can draw upon and your own creative imagination, you can make this a pretty fun adventure. So go ahead and tell me, are you going to run this book completely as written, or are you going to go ahead and take some creative liberties? How are your players' interactions with the Gripply going to be? Are the Gripply going to be able to actually speak Common, or are they just going to speak in Primordial or Gripply? What are you going to do with the Yuan-Ti? Are the Yuan-Ti purely evil, except for the good ones, which are totally good? Maybe there's something to be had with that. Go ahead and tell me how you're going to change up the combat encounters here. Go ahead and tell me all those things, because I want to know. That's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to all my amazing patrons up here. You guys are absolutely incredible. Thank you so very much. That's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.